Hey, what's up? I'm Norris and welcome back to another Sew Along. Now today we're going to be making my latest design with Mimi G Style and Simplicity pattern, which is a men's trench coat, 93.89. If you're new to sewing or need a refresher course, just click the link in the description box below. Now, because this is not a learn to sew video, if you need help as a beginner, you want to visit sewedacademy.com, which is an amazing resource for menswear and women's wear. And if you sign up for the free trial, you'll get the first 5 courses free with no credit card required. Now that we have all of that out the way, let's start sewing. Okay, once again, like I said, we're going to be using pattern 9389, and we have 2 views. View A is the longer one. It's about knee length. And then view B is a little bit shorter. It comes like mid-thigh. So you have 2 different options here. If you look on the back, once again, you have all of the notions, fabrics. It has all the different sizes. One thing to keep in mind when it comes to a little bit down here in the middle, it says finished garment measurements. You want to definitely measure there because it's going to give you exactly how long it's going to be, how wide it's going to be, and also the chest measurement. Now, this right here is a trench coat, so you don't want it too fitted. You want a nice amount of ease. So what you would normally cut out of a regular jacket or a shirt, you want to maybe go up a little bit or just look at how much ease you'll have, and then just use that measurement to go around your chest to see how loose it's going to fit. And once again, like I said, you want to get a little bit extra room because this is a trench coat. For the fabrics, you have so many different choices, cottons, linens, poplins. You could do lightweight wools, suiting. It's just so many possibilities when it comes to this trench coat. I would stay away from knits. You don't want any kind of stretch fabrics for this. One thing when it comes to the notions, I want to note, it says 11 1-inch buttons and 2 1 1/4 inch buckles. Now the buckles are for the sleeve band. I won't be using buckles for my sleeve band. I will be using buttons. So where it says 11, I'm gonna be adding 2 more, which is gonna be 13 for me. If you want to do the buckles, it's super easy to install. I'll walk you through it, but I will be showing you how to alter the sleeve band so you can have a button and make it look very nice. All right. So now that we have all of this out the way, let's go through all the pattern pieces we're going to be using. Okay, the first pattern piece you're going to use is the carrier. You want to cut one of these out of your fabric. Next, we have pattern piece number 13, which is the back facing. You want to cut one on the fold of fabric and one on the fold of interfacing. Now this piece right here is the sleeve tab. You want to cut 4 of these out of fabric and 2 of these out of interfacing. Now this right here is going to be the pattern piece. I'm going to be shortening it up because I'm not using a buckle. The buckle version is going to make it a little bit longer so you can wrap it within the buckle. But since I'm not doing that, I'm going to show you how to shorten it up so you can have a button. Next, we have pattern piece number 10, which is the upper collar. You want to cut one of these on a fold of fabric and one on the fold of interfacing. Pattern piece number 9, which is the neck band. You want to cut 2 of these on a fold of fabric, 1 on the fold of interfacing. Pattern piece number 11, which is the under collar. You want to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of interfacing. Pattern piece number 2, which is the welt. You want to cut 2 of these out of interfacing and 2 of these out of fabric. Pattern piece number 8, these are the shoulder tabs. You want to cut 4 of these out of fabric and 2 of these out of interfacing. Pattern piece number 6, this is the yoke front. You want to cut 1 of these out of fabric and 1 of these out of lining. Now, I'm not going to cut the second lining piece. I'm going to cut 2 out of fabric because when you flip it up, you'll be able to see the fabric on both sides. Now, this is optional. If you don't want it heavier, you want it a little bit lighter on underneath, you can cut yours out of lining, but I'm just giving you another option. Pattern piece number 3, this is the pocket. You want to cut 2 of these out of fabric and 2 of these out of lining. Pattern piece number 14, this is the upper sleeve. You want to cut 2 of these out of fabric and 2 of these out of lining. Pattern piece number 15 is the under sleeve. You want to cut 2 of these out of fabric and 2 of these out of lining. Now, one thing I want to note with these 2 pieces, when you cut it out of fabric, you want to cut it out of the full piece. But when you cut it out of lining, you want to cut off an inch on the hem. The lining is going to be a little bit shorter than the actual fabric pieces. Pattern piece number 17 is the belt. You want to cut one of these out of fabric and one out of interfacing. Pattern piece number 7 is the yoke back. You want to cut one of these on the fold out of fabric. Now I'm going to cut 2 of these on the fold instead of 1. The reason is because when you lift it up, you'll be able to see the right side underneath as well as on the top. All right, so I'll show you that once we get there. It is optional. You can cut one, but I'm gonna cut 2, and if you cut 2, I'm gonna show you how to use it. Next we have pattern piece number 12. Now this is the front facing. You want to cut 2 of these out of fabric and 2 of these out of interfacing. Next we have pattern piece number 4. This is the back piece. You want to cut 2 of these out of your fabric. Now last but not least, we have pattern piece number 1. This is the front piece. You want to cut 2 of these out of your fabric. Once you cut out all of your pattern pieces out of fabric, we can begin sewing. Okay, so before we move on, I want to inform you that I will be using faux leather. Now, because I'm using faux leather fabric, I won't be interfacing any of my pieces. Now, if you see me throughout this process with a piece that's not interfaced, it's only because I'm using leather. You cannot put heat on leather. And because it's pretty thick, I wouldn't need interfacing anyway. Now, if you're using any other fabric, such as a linen, a twill, a suiting, a light wool, you will be using interfacing for your pattern pieces that needs it. But if you're using a faux leather or any kind of other exotic fabric like the one I'm using, you won't be interfacing it. So just want to let you know, and I will be letting you know throughout the process, hey, look, this is not interfaced because it's a faux leather fabric. Also, I want you to know that I will be using these clamps here for my leather pieces, because you shouldn't be pinning your leather if you're using leather like I am. So you'll be seeing me use these if I say pin. If you're using just regular type of fabric, you will be pinning. But if you're using faux leather or any other fabrics like this, you should use these clamps here, which are amazing. Also, I will be finishing my seams off with bias tape. Now, you could use your serger, you can use your zigzag stitch, you can use peaking shears to finish off your seams. Now, once you cut out all your pattern pieces out of fabric, and also your lining, and also your interfacing, if you're using fabric for interfacing, we can begin sewing. Okay, so first you want to grab your welt pieces, and with right sides facing, you want to pin them or clip them if you're using a faux leather like me. And once again, this is not interfaced because it's a faux leather. Once you have it pinned or clamped, we're going to head over to the machine and we're going to stitch both sides down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, now back from the machine, I'm going to go ahead and trim some of this off and come closer to the edge so we can have a more rounded corner like this. And then I'm going to turn this right side out. Now, because this is leather, I won't be pressing it at all. But if you have regular fabric, you want to go ahead and give this a good press. So you want to head over to the machine and we're going to stitch this down sides across the top and down the other side, a 1/4 inch away from the edge. Okay, so we're back from the machine. You can see I top stitched this. Now next, before we move along to our pocket bag, we want to take a ruler and we're going to measure up 5/8 of an inch from the bottom edge, and we're going to mark it. Now I have a chalk roller, and this is really good to mark on leather. Okay. Now once you do that, you want to trim it down to a 1/4 inch. This next step is going to be very important. Now the instructions have you base this down onto your front piece, but I have a better technique, and it's a little bit easier and a little bit more precise. Now, because the pocket bag goes on top of this, I'm going to place this here. And mind you, you have a top stitching line and you have a bottom stitching line. The bottom stitching line, you want to line that up with the stitching line onto your welt. We're placing this upside down, and your right side is going to be on the bottom. So the wrong side of your welt is going to be this side, which is going to be the one that flips up that everyone is going to see. So turn it upside down, and you want to basically pin or clamp down and line up this line right here with the line on your welt. Now, if you have a pin, it's a little bit easier. You can pin that bottom line and see where that pin is on underneath, and then you can pin through. Like I said, I won't be pinning through mine. I'm just going to be clamping it. So head to your machine, and we're going to baste these two pieces together, matching up the lines. Okay, so I'm just lining mine up. And like I said, I take a pin and just stick it on that line to see if it touches that line underneath. And if it does, I keep it there. You want to backstitch at the beginning and also at the end. Okay, once again, like I said, I take a pin and I just place it through my lining and to see if it's hitting the line that I have on my welt. And if it is, I go ahead and I stitch. Be sure to backstitch at the beginning and also at the end. And then you want to keep checking. Line that thing up. And then one more time. Okay, now we're back from the machine. We have the welt based down onto our pocket bag. Now, one thing I want you to note, if your welt pocket, once you turn it right side out, if it don't meet the dots on both sides, you want to stop stitching wherever your welt stops. You don't want to go all the way through to that dot if your welt is not touching it. I'm not sure if the pocket bag is off a little, or for some reason when you turn your fabric right side out, it doesn't extend. For me, my faux leather doesn't extend all the way to that marking. So I'm stopping wherever my welt stops. Now, as you can see, the stitching stops here and the stitching stops here. Once again, do not keep stitching if your welt doesn't extend all the way to that marking. Okay, you just want to stop wherever your welt is. Now we're going to go ahead and grab our front piece. Now this right here is the right side, but it's the left side if you're looking at it like this. Okay, so that means your pocket is going to be slanted this way and you put your hand in this way. All right, this is the side seam, this is the front. Now we're going to take the pocket and the welt, and we're going to align it onto your front piece. Now, it's easy now because you have a stitching to match up with that marking that's on your front piece. Now, you want to line that up. If you have pins, you want to pin it. Once you have it in place, we're going to head to the machine and we're going to stitch through all thicknesses. Okay, so I'm just aligning this stitching line with the bottom stitching line on my pattern piece. Okay, once again, we're going to be aligning this stitching line here with the stitching line here on your front piece. Okay, and it's easy to see it because we have it already based. Okay, so backstitch at the beginning and also at the end. Sew a little bit, then keep checking it. Now you want to be sure to stop exactly where your stitching stopped. So if you see my pin, my stitching is right here and the dot is here. My welt ends where the stitching is, so that's where I'm going to stop. Okay, now that we're here, we're going to go all the way back up and we're going to stitch down where we see the stitching line here. So place it where that dot is. You want to backstitch at the beginning and also at the end. Okay, so before we get to the end, because we didn't stitch to the dot here, we won't stitch to the dot on this side. Mind you, if your welt extends all the way to the dot, you can go all the way there. But my stitching stops here where my welt is, and I want to stop right above there. Just like that. Okay, now that we're back from the machine, we want to go ahead and take your scissors or rotary cutters, and you just want to make a slit in the center and then cut until you get 5/8 of an inch away from the end. Now, once you get 5/8 of an inch away, you want to take your scissors or whatever you're cutting with and angle it, and you want to cut to your stitching. Now, if your stitching is in a different place than your dot, ignore your marking and go to where your stitching stops. Okay. Now here, I'm not going to cut all the way through. I'm just going to cut my lining to that stitching. Then I'm going to turn this around. Now when I get 5/8 of an inch away, I'm going to cut all through upward to my stitching. Now, as you see here, I cut to my stitching. Now, if I would have cut to my marking instead of to my stitching, my binding box would have been too big for my welt. Now, this is very important. So next, I'm going to just only cut my lining to my marking. And I'm going to flip it around, and I'm going to cut that triangle on the opposite end. I'm doing it this way because I'm trying to avoid cutting through my welt. I don't like cutting through my welt, so I just cut on both sides of the welt. Now on this side, you do the same thing. You want to cut okay, you should end up with a triangle on both sides, just like this. Okay, so now I'm going to take my lining piece and turn it to the inside. And that's how it's going to end up. But for now, I'm going to turn it. Now, if you're using regular fabric, you want to lay down your fabric, head to your pressing table, and give this a good press. Okay, now that we're back, it should look like this on the back side, and then like this on the front. Because I'm using leather, I went ahead and edge stitch on my bottom seam there just so it could lay flat. And then I edge stitch across the top here. So that's why you get this lining that lays flat just like that. Okay, so next we're going to turn this right side down, and we're going to grab our pocket that we cut out of fabric. So you want to do right sides facing, and basically what we're going to do, we want to either pin it or clip it down. You should have a notch right here in the center. Now you want to head to the machine and stitching only on your pocket bag, not on your front piece. We're going to stitch all the way around using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance down the side, around the bottom of the pocket bag, and then up the other side. Now you want to remember you have your little triangle cutout pieces. You want to make sure all of that is within the seam allowance so you can stitch that down. Okay, so I'm starting across the top in the center. So you want to backstitch at the beginning. Now, so once we get to the corner, we want to pivot. All right, so I went ahead and stitched all the way around, as you can see, and then I serged all the way around. I'm not going to be using bias tape on my pocket bag, but I will be using it for my seams. All right, so if you turn it this way, okay, so on the right side, only thing left to do is to edge stitch right there on that welt, and then also on this side right here. Okay, so I'm gonna start on the left side here. And you just want it flat. As you can see the inside of the welt right there. So you just want to have that extend over just a little bit. Backstitch at the beginning, also at the end. And you want to stitch the other side the same exact way. Okay, so now that we're back from the machine, as you can see, I've edge stitched here, and then now your welt pocket is complete. So now we're going to move along to our front yoke. Okay, so moving along to our front yoke. Now this front yoke is going to lay on top of the front piece. So if you lift it up, you will see the lining. So like I said, it is optional if you want to cut both out of fabric instead of one out of lining or one out of fabric. All right, but whatever you decide, you want to place them right sides facing. And then you want to pin or either clip them together. Okay, we're going to head to the machine where you're only going to stitch around this curved edge here, and we're going to stop here, leaving the top and this side right here free, and we're going to be stitching this down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, now that I'm back from the machine, I'm going to just do some clipping in this curve here. That should be good. And then I'm going to trim it down just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to turn it right side out. So because this goes on the right, the side that you're looking at right here is going to be underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to understitch as much as I can all the way around. If you want to do that, you can. It is optional. But then after I do that, I'm going to turn it this way and I'm going to top stitch it a 1/4 inch away from the side. All right, so I'm back from the machine. After I understitched, I went ahead and top stitched all the way around on this curve here. And then now I've grabbed the right front. And if you're looking at it like this, it looks like the left, but if you're wearing it, it's on the right side. So I'm just basically just going to take this, and you should have a notch. You line that up here just like that. I'm just going to go ahead and base this down here and then here. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, so before we continue, you want to be sure to stay stitch your neckline on both sides of your fronts. And then you want to finish your other welt pocket the same exact way. Now we're going to move along to our back pieces. Okay, so the same thing with our back pieces. You want to stay stitch the neckline. I'm stitching inward. Okay, also as you can see, I've already added black bias tape to my inside raw edge. This is no different than serging your seams before you sew. So if you want to use bias tape, you can do the same exact thing. And as you can see, I've added it all the way down and I just left it maybe an inch away from the hem. Now, this is step number 12. You also have the option to finish that edge of your vent by turning in 5/8 of an inch and then stitching that down. So you could use bias tape, or you could just finish that off by turning 5/8 of an inch in and then stitching it down. Step number 12. So you have the option to serge your seam right now, or add bias tape, or however you want to finish your seams before you sew it. So we're right sides facing. You want to line it up. You should have 3 notches in the back. I'm gonna go ahead and put my clamps in. Okay, once you have it pinned or clamped down, you want to start at the top and you want to stitch all the way down until you get to your dot here. There should be a marking. Don't forget to mark all of your markings. You want to stitch this down, break your stitch, and because I'm not using a regular traditional fabric, I'm using leather, I won't be doing this next step. But if you have regular fabric, you can go ahead and continue stitching down using a basting stitch. We're not stitching this closed, we're only basting it closed. If you don't want to baste it, you don't have to, but basting it makes it a little bit easier with the construction process. And once again, you stitch from the top all the way down until you get to your marking, back stitch, break your thread, and there should be a stitching line that goes all the way down here, but it's only a basting stitch. Do not stitch this down with a regular stitch, only baste it from the dot down. And once you do that, you're gonna also start here at your marking, and you want to stitch this little part right here down with a basting stitch as well, 5/8 of an inch away from this edge. Okay, so we're back from the machine. I went ahead and stitched it down, as you can see the seam. So on the right side, which is the left side right here, if you turn your jacket the way I have it, you will be in good shape. So you want to just take your scissors and we're going to slash until we get to that marking. Do not cut your thread, just to it. Okay, so I'm going to open it up now. So it should open like this. So now you can head to your pressing table. You can press this open. And then this right here, your vent should lay to this side right here. Okay. So after you give it a good press, you want to keep this in place right here. You can pin it if you like. If you're using leather, you won't be able to pin it, so you have to hold it. And on the left side, we're just going, you can actually feel it too. You want to make sure everything is flat. We're going to be top stitching it down starting from the seam where that dot is, and then all the way here to the edge. We're just going to stitch that down right there, 5/8 of an inch away from the edge of the vent on the inside right here. So starting where that dot is at the seam all the way to the end, 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, just stitching that down. Okay, so once you press this open, I went ahead and just basically stitch close to the edge so my seam can lay flat because I can't press my leather. So after you press that down, went ahead and stitch to the left side. Now that vent lays to that left side, which is on the right here. So once you do that, you want to put it to the side for just a moment, and we're going to work on the back yoke. So with the back yoke, you only had to cut out one. I'm going to show you why I cut out two. But if you cut out one, you can just serge the bottom and then just turn up 5/8 of an inch. You give it a good press, and then you can just top stitch that down. But because I want to have fabric on both sides, I'm going to use two. So I'm just basically going to clip mine at the bottom. So I'm going to head to the machine and I'm going to stitch this down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then after I do that, I'm going to understitch one side. Now this right here is optional. You do not have to do this step. Okay, so after I understitch, I went ahead and top stitch 1/4 inch away from the bottom. And then I just baste the sides and then baste the top and then also the neck. While it's laying flat and not attached to the back yet, this is a good time to go ahead and do your buttonhole. So if you know what buttons you're using, go ahead and make that buttonhole. There's a marker on the pattern piece just so you don't miss that. So now we're going to grab the back piece and right sides facing. We're going to put the back yoke right side up onto that pattern piece. Okay. So if you didn't use both sides of fabric, this right here would be the wrong side, and the wrong side would be touching the right side of the back pattern piece. All right, so the only thing we're going to do is pin or use your clips. Should be 2 notches up here. Should be a notch there. And there should be 2 notches down here. Okay, So just go back to the machine and we're just going to base this down all the way around except for the bottom here. Okay, so now that we have our back yoke based down onto our back, we're going to grab our front pieces and we're just going to attach them at the shoulders. And you want to pin or either use your clamps. Okay, other side. So then we're going to head to the machine. We're going to just basically stitch both of the shoulders down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, as you can see, I went ahead and attached my front and back at the shoulders. So now I'm just going to take this and move it to the side for just a moment. And we're going to work on the collar and the collar band. So first you want to grab your under collar pieces, which is this piece right here. It should be 2 pieces. You want to turn them right sides facing. You can pin it, I'll just clip it a few times. Go ahead and stitch this down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Press the seams, come back and we'll continue. All right, so we're back from the machine. As you can see, I went ahead and opened up my seams. If you're not able to press your seams open, you can stitch on both sides of the seam, as you can see, and it will open that up and it'll keep your seams open and flat. Okay, so I'm just lay that down for right now. And we're going to take the upper collar and we're going to pin or either clamp it down. You should have a notch here and also here. So then we're going to head to the machine. We're going to stitch this down starting here. 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way across and then down to the other side, leaving the bottom open. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Now that we're back from the machine, you want to go ahead and trim your corners. And then I can like to trim mine down to maybe 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so before we turn it right side out, we're going to do some understitching on the under collar. So basically, you want to open it up like this. This right here is my under collar on this side because you see the seam. You want to take that seam allowance and push it to the right. And you want to get as close as you can to the edge, maybe about 2 inches, 2 or 3 inches from the corner. And then we're just going to edge stitch, basically stitching on the right side of the seam, catching the seam allowance. And we're going to go as far as we can, about 2 or 3 inches away on the other side. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, now you see I did my understitching. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this right side out. Poke out your corners really good. Okay, so that understitching on the undercollar allows your undercollar to roll to the inside. And it should basically look just like this. And now that seam is right there and not at the edge. So once again, if you have regular fabric, you can go ahead and give this a good press. If not, you can just skip pressing it. So we're going to head to the machine and we're going to top stitch a 1/4 inch from the edge. We're going to pivot, go across the bottom, and then pivot to the other side. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, after you top stitch a 1/4 inch away from the edge, across the top here, you want to just base that down, and you can have, and you'll have 2 notches to indicate the top. Okay, now we're going to sandwich the collar in between the collar band. So you're going to take one of your collar bands, and there are 2 notches towards the top, just like that. So you want to have one right side up, and then you want your under collar to be touching the one that's laying down like that. And then we're going to sandwich the other one with the 2 notches, matching all of the 2 notches here. And we're going to either pin or use your clamps. So we're going to head to the machine and we're going to start on one end and we're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Come to the corner here and pivot. Sew all the way across. Pivot one more time, and we're going to end on the other side. Once again, we're using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, now that we have this stitch, you want to just double check to make sure you didn't get any of that collar on any one of your sides before we trim. So I just clipped into it just a little bit so I can get a good turn. Okay. All right, so if you're working with a regular fabric, you can go ahead and press. If not, you want to skip the pressing and just go ahead and just clip down the bottom. Okay, so now we're going to head to the machine. We're going to top stitch a 1/4 inch away from the side, and then a 1/4 inch away from this inside seam here, and then pivot, and then down this side as well. Once you do that, you want to go ahead and just base the bottom close. Okay, now that we have our collar and collar band prepared, we're going to go ahead and grab our front and back pieces. And then now we're going to attach this to our jacket. So you want your undercollar to be touching the back. And now we're just going to pin or either clamp this down. Should have a notch there and a notch here. The end of your collar band should be touching a big dot. I went and put a notch instead of a dot. It made it easier for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and secure that. Okay, so head to the machine. We're just going to base this down. Okay, now that we have the collar and the collar band based onto the jacket, we're gonna go ahead and close out the side seams. So right sides facing, you wanna put your front and your back on top of each other like this. And then you wanna take your clips or either your pins. You wanna secure where your notch is first, and then all the way down. So just head to the machine, and we're gonna start at the top and stitch all the way down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You wanna pin and sew or clip the other side the same exact way. Okay, as you can see, I went ahead and stitched down my side seams. I put a bias on that side seam, and then I stitched it down to the back because I can't press it. So next, we're going to go ahead and move along to our front facing and our back facing. Okay, so for the back facing, I went ahead and finished the bottom with a bias tape. You can serge and just fold under 5/8 of an inch and then top stitch it. But for me, like I said, I want the bias finish. And I did the same thing for my front facing. And you're basically just going to do the side that curve. You can do the hem, like I said, serge and then turn on the 5/8 of an inch and then stitch, or you can use bias tape, peek and shear, zigzag stitch, whatever you want to finish yours off. And then I went ahead and stay stitched the fronts of the front facing, as you can see. And then you're supposed to stay stitch the back, but I didn't do the back because I don't think I need it. So next, we're gonna go ahead and attach these to the shoulders. So right sides facing. You want to line them up just like this. You can pin or either use your clips. Okay, so now we're going to head to the machine and we're going to stitch both shoulders down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, so after you stitch down the shoulders, obviously you want to press your seams open. For me, I just stitch close to the seam on both sides to flatten out that seam because I have faux leather once again. And this is the shape you're gonna have. So now we're going to turn this right sides facing onto our jacket. So you want to have the collar and the collar band pressed down. Well, just facing down rather. And then we're going to take the facing and we're going to match up our darts first. You have a double notch here that you want to match up. Okay, so if you didn't notice on your pattern piece, it says to ease. So if you didn't notice on your pattern piece, it says to ease right here. Mine's got a little give, so I can pull it for it to fit. So when I start sewing, I'm going to just pull it a little bit and stitch, just to get rid of that fabric right there. But if your fabric is really stiff and it don't move, you want to do 2 rows of basting stitches right here and just ease that just a little bit, okay? Okay, so now that I have it all together, we're going to start. We're going to start down here at the hem on one side. We're going to sew all the way up. Get here, pivot, go across the neckline, making sure that our collar and our collar band is tucked in. And then basically you come to the corner and pivot and go all the way down to the hem here. Once again, if your fabric don't give, you have to ease this portion in. So basically do 2 rows of basting stitches and just ease it in a little bit so that can fit perfect. Stitch, come back and we'll continue. Okay, now that we're back from the machine, I'm gonna go ahead and start trimming. So I'm not trimming too much off my neck, but I am making little clips in here. I'll turn it right side out, point your corners out. Okay, so before I tuck this underneath, you want to go ahead and go to the machine and we're going to understitching on the facing, starting at the collar band here and all the way through to this side. So basically you're just going to take it, you're going to put your seam allowance on the facing and you're going to stitch close to that seam right there. Okay, so we're back from the machine. We did our understitching on our facing. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the facing, we're going to turn it under and we're going to match up the seams, match up both shoulder seams just like that, and then you're going to either pin or clip along that armhole. We will be basting this down. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing to the other side. So take your facing and we're going to turn it under and we're going to match up those shoulder seams right there and either pin or clip. So now we're going to head over to the machine and we're going to baste this down, basting through all the thicknesses so the facing will stay in place underneath the shoulder. Okay, so moving right along, we have the jacket almost complete. We're going to add our sleeves and a few other little minor details. So let me go ahead and open it up. You have the facing attached, inside front facing and the back facing. And then now we're going to work on the hem. So I'm going to move this up. So we're going to turn the facing onto itself just like this. So just like that, and we're going to pin or either clip. And then the same thing to the other side. Okay, so we're going to be doing a 1.5 inch hem allowance. So we're going to start right here at the stitching and then stitch all the way until we get to the end of the facing. Okay, you want to do both sides the same exact way. Okay, so this is how the hem look right here. So we're going to cut 5/8 of an inch away from the edge of the facing, and then also 5/8 of an inch away from the stitching right here. Let's see, let me see if I can mark it off to be precise. Okay, so this is how it's going to look once you do that. So it's going to look just like this. You want to give this a good press. If you have a regular fabric, you want to do both front corners the same exact way. And then also, you want to do the left side of the vent the same way. Now you want to take the vent on the left side, turn it onto itself like this, and we're going to stitch this across. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, once again, this is the front, and then this right here is the left vent, left side of the vent. So go ahead and do the same thing. Turn this right side out. And since I can't press this, I'm gonna go ahead and put a clip where the hem stops so everything can be precise when it comes to the hem. So we have the left side, which is on the right side right now, bent hem done. I'm gonna put a clip there too, just so it could be in the right place. So since it's 1.5 inches, I'm going to turn under a 1/2 inch. So I have a regular 1 inch hem, since it's 1.5 inches total. So I'm just going to turn that under, just like that. And then since I can't pin, I'm going ahead and clip it down. So that's how I'm going to finish off the hem. The instructions might tell you to do a blind hem or a slip stitch. I would do that if I had a different type of fabric, but I'm not going to do that on this faux leather. I'm just going to turn under a 1/2 inch, and then on this side I'm going to stitch it down across the bottom. And then the same thing on this side. I'm going to turn under a 1/2 inch and then finish the hem by top stitching on this side at 1 inch. So I'm just going to clip all the way across to keep everything in place, since I cannot pin it or press it. But right here, I finished it with bias tape. What I'm going to do is I'm going to undo my threads just right here. So I'm just going to take my thread and just open this up a little bit. Okay, just like that. And then here, I'm just going to turn under that 1/2 inch. And then once I'm done, I can put that back on top and I have a clean finish right here. So go ahead and make your mind up how you want to finish your hem. If you want to turn under a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch like me, or just serge it and then press it all the way up and have a big 1.5 inch stitching or slip stitch. So whatever you decide, go ahead and do that now. Okay, so as you can see, the hem is done. And then right after you do that, you want to stitch starting at that dot, and then a 1/4 inch away, stitch, and then go all the way down to the hem. And you want to do that for both sides. All right, so right now you want to put this to the side for just a moment, and we're going to focus on our shoulder tabs. So it's pretty simple, right sides facing. You want to go to the machine, and we're going to stitch all the way around except for the bottom here. Go up, across, and then down using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, not 5/8, 3/8. Once you do that, you're going to turn the right side out. You're going to poke out your corners. You're going to top stitch a 1/4 inch away from the edge, and then also do your buttonhole. And then once you do that, you want to go ahead and attach them right here on your shoulder. You're just going to tack that down. So go ahead and do the other one the same exact way and base it on your other shoulder here. Okay, as you can see, I went ahead and based my shoulder tabs right here where the shoulder is. And for right now, I'm going to put this to the side, and we're going to work on our sleeves. Pattern piece number 16 is the sleeve tab. Now this is pretty long because it's meant to have a buckle, and the buckle allows it to be long enough and wrap around and secure the sleeve. You can see it in detail on your instructions. So if you want to do that version, obviously you're going to cut 4 and then 2 of interfacing if you have regular fabric. And there are markings. I went ahead and did some notches to indicate where the placement go. But once you turn it the right side out, after you stitch 2 of them, one interfaced and one uninterfaced, right sides facing, and then you do a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you turn the right side out, that placement should be right there. And then also you have a stitching line right here. Now this is where you stitch, and then the buckle would slide through, and then it would stop right there automatically. And then you just put it in the middle until you do the other stitching. But for me, I just want a regular sleeve tab with the buttonhole and a button on the front. So what I did was I went ahead and I measured from one end to one end at the widest width. So if you want to have this same one that I'm doing, this is how you measure it out, because this one right here is pretty long with the buckle. So right sides facing, you want to go ahead and go to the machine, stitch going up one side, across the top, and then down the other side, leaving the bottom open using 5/8 of an inch. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, I'm going to trim my corners. Then we'll trim this down to about 1/4 inch or 3/8 of an inch. Now I'm just going to turn it right side out. Okay, so go ahead and press your sleeve tab. If it's not faux leather or any kind of exotic fabric like this, I'm gonna go ahead and top stitch all the way around, leaving the bottom open a 1/4 inch away from the side. And then also you want to go ahead and do your buttonhole. Now you want to place your buttonhole maybe a 1/4 inch within the 1/4 inch top stitch. So do all that, come back, and we'll continue. So I went ahead and did my buttonhole and just stitched all the way around with a 1/4 inch away from the edge. And I basted it here on this side. Now this is the side that is shorter. It's going to go on the inside of your arm. And then you want to get a pin and put it like a 1/4 inch inside your buttonhole from the left, and then place where your button is going to go. That's going to be a great placement. And then next, you want to grab your carrier. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to fold in one half and then the other half like that. And then you're gonna fold that entire thing in half just like this. You want to now take this to the machine and we're going to stitch close to the edge, and then you're going to stitch close to the folded edge too. Now when you do that, it's going to look just like this. Now you want to measure 2 3/4 of an inch. And this is how you do the placement for this particular sleeve tab style, not the other one. The other placement, I'm going to show you that later. But for this one, if you're doing this one, you want to go ahead and tuck under 3/8 of an inch. You can measure if you need to. I'm just eyeball it. And we're going to place it just past the buttonhole to the right. Now, once you get that placement, you can go ahead and mark it. Okay. So I'm going to mark it just a little closer where that tab is at. Okay, so now I can put this out the way and then place this here. You want to place it just past, maybe 1/8 of an inch past your marking. And then stitch it down, and then you're going to do the other one the same exact way. You're going to fold under 3/8 of an inch, and you're just going to edge stitch the top. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, then I have it stitched down on the top and the bottom. You want to go ahead and cut away that extra excess. Okay. And then it fits in perfect, just like that. So last thing you have to do is just hand tack your button, and you'll be pretty much finished with this method. But you want to wait until we do this seam before adding the button. Okay, so now I went ahead and grabbed my undersleeve, and on the inside there are 2 notches. You want to do 2 rows of basting stitches and gather just a little bit right here for ease. And once you do that, you want to turn this right side facing, and you want to stitch starting at the sleeve hem all the way up to here using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So go ahead and do your 2 rows of basting stitches and ease and do that seam. Come back and we'll continue. Okay, so now I went ahead and eased that a little bit. I'm gonna take that out the belt loop so it won't be too close to the seam, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this right side facing. I'm going to go ahead and add my clips, match up your notches. Your notches should match up, so if it's too much, let it out, and if it's not enough, just ease it a little bit more. Okay, so go ahead and do this seam using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, now that I have this stitched together, you want to press your seam. For me, like I said, I went ahead and just edge stitched on this side here so I can lay my seams flat. So next, we're just going to move this out the way, and we're going to do the same thing on this side. So just pin or clamp. And there's no easing on this side, so just match up that double knot you have, and everything should match up. So now we just do the same thing, stitch this side down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Also be sure not to get your tab caught into this seam. It should not be caught up. All right, so I'm back from the machine, and it should look like this. Now if you're doing the sleeve tab with the buckle, you want to place your belt loop, not here, but here. You want to place it right here. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and put my button on, and then I'm going to go ahead and prep my lining. So for your lining places, you want to take your undersleeve and do that gathering right there the same way. And then for both of them, you want to take off an inch off the hem. So let me go ahead and measure that out. Okay, so do the other one the same exact way. I'm just going to trim it off. Okay, so go ahead and stitch your lining together the same way we did our sleeve here. And don't forget to go ahead and add your button now if you're doing buttons. Okay, I went ahead and put my lining together. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to put this inside and grab my clamps. If you have regular fabric, you can go ahead and pin. I'm going to use my clamps. I'm going to clamp first on the seams, match those up, and then continue pinning or clamping. Okay, so we're just going to head over to the machine and we're going to stitch all the way around using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, so we're going to turn this out like this. And then you're just going to take that lining and pull it towards you. Okay. So at this point, you want to decide how you want the inside of your armhole to be finished. I'm going to give you 2 options. The first option, you can go ahead and ease in your sleeve cap separate for your sleeve and then also your sleeve lining. You don't want to baste them together. And then you go ahead and you attach your sleeve to your jacket without your sleeve lining. After you do that, you want to ease in your sleeve cap for your lining and then press under 5/8 of an inch all the way around. And then you'll be able to slip stitch this. But for me, I'm going to be using bias tape on my seam. So I'm going to go ahead and baste this all together. So this is how the instructions have you do it as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and clamp it up. Match all your notches up. I'm gonna put a few more in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and head to the machine and I'm gonna baste all the way around. And then after I do that, I'm going to ease in the sleeve cap. So I'm going to start, where is it? I'm going to start at one of my notches. This is my double notch. And then I'm going to go around until I get to my single notch, which is right here. You're going to do 2 rows of basting stitches and then ease that in, okay? If you're doing it the first method, you don't want to baste these together. You want to ease both the sleeve caps in separately. Okay, so I went ahead and eased my sleeve cap on both of my sleeves. And then I went ahead and tacked down my lining right there through the lining and then onto the fabric so it won't pull, okay? So now I'm gonna grab the jacket. I'm just gonna start with one of my sleeves. So I'm gonna match up one of my notches. So that's my double notch right there. I'm gonna go ahead and clamp that. And then I'm gonna bring it to the inside. Just like this, okay? And we're gonna continue pinning. If you didn't want to do it this method, I'm gonna be finishing mine off with a bias tape. But if you wanted to have your seam encased into the actual sleeve, like I said, these right here would be separate, and then you would just basically stitch on the sleeve first and then take your lining and then hand stitch it, slip stitch it on just like that, okay? But I'm going to do the same method that it shows in the instructions. And this is how I wanted mine done because I'm finishing it off with a bias tape. Okay, so basically I'm just going to pin, and then you just want to see how much you have to take in more or take in less. So I have to do mine just a little bit more. Okay, that should do it. Okay, so we have it all set up. Now just head to the machine and we're going to do a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. You want to pin or clip and stitch your other sleeve to your jacket the same exact way. Okay, as you can see, I have both of my sleeves added. I'm gonna go ahead and finish off my seams later with bias tape, but for right now, we're gonna go ahead and move along to our belt tabs. So the remainder of the tabs, if you cut it in half, you should have 3.5 inches. So I'm gonna go ahead and slide up. So on the side, you should have 2 markings for your placement. Mine is right here. Lay this out flat. Okay, so we're going to take this and we're going to put this on the same way we did the tabs on our sleeve. So basically turn in 3/8 of an inch. You want to stitch that down, and then the same thing for the one up top. Turn under and then top stitch that down. Okay, so you want to do this one and then the other one the same exact way on the other side. Okay, so we added the belt loops right here for our belt, and then now we're going to sew that up. So this is the belt. So you want to fold it onto itself, right sides facing. And then now we're going to start on one end, stitch up, pivot, and then you want to sew until about halfway. And then when you get to the middle, you want to leave about a 5-inch opening, and then stitch all the way to this side, pivot, and then down the other side. Once you do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and trim some of my corners. Trim some of that down. Okay, so now we're going to turn this right side out. So if you have regular fabric, go ahead and give it a good press. If not, you can just skip that and start stitching a 1/4 inch away from the edge all the way around. And then when you get to the opening, you're just going to tuck that seam allowance in, and you're going to edge stitch, and then you're going to stitch a 1/4 inch away from the edge, just like the other stitches. Okay, so I'm finally done. I went ahead and finished off my belt. You can see a top stitch, and I closed out my opening. Only thing left to do is to do your buttonholes and then put your buttons on. If you wanted to do the buckle for the belt, it is step number 53. Only thing you do is to take one end and loop it. And once you loop it, you're just going to stitch it, and then you have that buckle. All right. Other than that, we're all done. All right, you did it. Congratulations. You have your very own trench coat, and I can't wait to see you post them all online. And please tag me at Norris Danta Ford, and we'll see you in the next sew along.